President Obama created a firestorm last week when he called on Israel to return to its pre-1967 borders. His speech prompted outrage among supporters of the Jewish state.
It was also rejected by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The president tried to clarify his remarks over the weekend, but as Eric Stakelbeck reports, questions still remain.
Fresh off his controversial comments calling for Israel to return to its 1967 borders, President Obama came into a virtual lion's den when he addressed the huge pro-Israel group known as AIPAC. Despite open differences with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the president tried to ease doubts about his administration's friendliness towards Israel.
I and my administration have made the security of Israel a priority. It's why we've increased cooperation between our militaries to unprecedented levels. It's why we're making our most advanced technologies available to our Israeli allies.
In an attempt to clarify last week's border remarks, he said that Israelis and Palestinians should negotiate a border different from the one in 1967 that would acknowledge, quote, new demographic realities on the ground. But his bottom line remained the same. Israel must give up land.
The Palestinian people must have the right to govern themselves and reach their potential in a sovereign and contiguous state.
The president sought to reaffirm America's security commitment to Israel, but there's a sense here that he could still do much more to pressure the Palestinians over terrorism and their refusal to recognize Israel's right to exist. A chief concern is the recent unity deal between Fatah and the terrorist group Hamas.
I don't think we can expect Israel to negotiate with a terrorist entity. We in the United States don't negotiate with al-Qaeda, and we didn't negotiate with Osama bin Laden.
Another issue is that the president still has not publicly ruled out the so-called right of return for Palestinian refugees, which Prime Minister Netanyahu has said will not happen.
It would be important to hear President Obama say that Palestinians should go back to a Palestinian state.
As for the biggest sticking point of all, the status of Jerusalem, President Obama did not address it at AIPAC. Netanyahu gets his chance to address the group and a joint session of Congress this week. Eric Stakelbeck, CBN News, Washington.
Well, there's a reason the previous presidents have never announced the 67 borders as a goal. And that is, if you do that, then that becomes the starting point for negotiation. That is no longer the ending point. So by publicly announcing it, he's not accelerating the peace process. What he's doing is telling the Palestinians, here's a reward for all your terrorism. Here's a reward for never recognizing Israel. And we're going to pursue peace at whatever cost and do it at whatever borders you guys want. And then on top of it, he's doing it in the middle of turmoil in the Middle East. Hamas has now put forward a presidential candidate in Egypt. Is that going to turn Egypt into a theocracy? Syria is in turmoil. Both of those states are on the borders of Israel. So how are you going to have peace unless Syria and Egypt come to the table? Until Hamas is no longer running the Gaza Strip, until the Palestinian Authority recognizes Israel's right to exist. Those need to be the precedents. Those need to be the basis for peace. It's not based on a border. It's based on them saying, we give up trying to drive Israel to the sea. Now, the problem, they can't do that. When they do, as Anwar Sadat learned, they get killed because their religion says we have to own Israel again. We have to reoccupy that. We have to take back Jerusalem. And that's exactly what a Muslim cleric said in the streets of Cairo just 2 months ago. Until you have that change, that Jerusalem is no longer central to their aspirations, you're not going to see peace. Lee Webb has the rest of our top stories from the CBN Newsroom. Lee?
Gordon, here at home, a massive tornado that tore through the southwest Missouri town of Joplin killed at least 89 people. Authorities warn that death toll could climb. Police officers, firefighters, and volunteers still looking for survivors there. Much of the city's south side was leveled, with churches, schools, businesses, even the hospital and homes reduced to ruins.
It just makes you think just how quick something can happen. You know, 1 minute it was just barely sprinkling, and next minute, boy, just whole world just upside down.
The fire chief says the twister cut the city of 50,000 in half. I believe that's the hospital you're looking at. The roof came off of that building, and at least 30% of that building was destroyed. It had to be evacuated later on when it caught on fire. It's been 2 months now since a popular pastor released his book about heaven and hell, and is still stirring up debate. Rob Bell's Love Wins challenges the biblical definition of hell and who ends up there. Ephraim Graham has that story.
Gandhi's in hell? He is? And someone knows this for sure?
Rob Bell's bestseller, Love Wins, made him one of Time magazine's most influential people and sparked an uproar in Christian circles. In the book, Bell questions the traditional notion of hell as a place where people will suffer for eternity and suggests because of God's love, everyone will ultimately be forgiven.
It surprised me that there isn't a widely held understanding that we are disciples of Jesus. And so we're learning and we're growing.
The pastor of the 10,000-member Mars Hill Bible Church talked to CBN News about his book that challenges fundamental Christian beliefs about heaven.
Will only a few select people make it to heaven?
And perhaps more surprisingly, hell.
Actually, hell's very easy for me to grasp. I see rape, abuse. We've seen genocide in our generation. We've seen financial scandals. I've sat with people deep in the throes of hardcore drug addiction where there's a vacant, sort of empty look in their eyes. I see hell all the time around me through all sorts of destructive choices that we make.
That's brought criticism from popular ministers like John Piper, who quickly tweeted, "Farewell, Rob Bell." Another pastor said, "There's nothing loving about preaching a false gospel."
The question of justice. People do horrible things, and if they die and don't get judged on this earth, there must be justice somewhere.
Dr. Vincent Synan is the former dean of Regent University's School of Divinity.
To say there's no heaven or no hell just means that there's no meaning to existence. And the Bible clearly teaches that there is a hell for the unrighteous who die persistently in sin and do not repent. And there's a heaven for the righteous to be forever with God. I'll take my chances with the Bible.
Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Gordon, back to you.
Well, there is a hell. You know who talked about it most? Jesus Christ. When you look at the Bible and read it from end to end, the most references to hell come from the mouth of Jesus. Why else would he go to the cross? Why else would he beg the Father in Gethsemane, is there another way? Can there be another way? Why would he endure the cross unless there were some eternal consequences? That he paid the price. And he says it clearly, I came not to judge the world, but to save it. And he is the way, the truth, and the life. You don't go to heaven, you don't go to the Father, but by him. Now, I think the mistake some people get into is they look at good people and say, you know, are they going or not? Well, that's not for you to decide. And Jesus, again, says it clearly. What's going to judge people at the end? Well, his word will, and also the words of their mouths. He says it to the wicked servant, I will judge you by the word of your mouth. And so with that, he's admonishing us not to judge, or will be judged. Literally, our words will come back to us and judge us.